Hello and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories. I'm your host, John DeLynn. This is going to be part two of a series that we have done with Jacob and Hannah Ricks. You'll know from our first interview that Jacob was summoned to a disciplinary council on January 3rd, 2016. And so we did a full interview about his background, about Hannah's, and about their thoughts around the disciplinary council. Our plan was to have Jacob record that interview and to share the recording. I think our assumption was that Jacob would be disciplined in some way. So we all sort of sat at the edge of our chairs on pins and needles on Sunday, and lo and behold, what we found out was that Jacob received a verdict of no decision or no action, which meant that he was neither disfellowshipped nor excommunicated. So we're here to have Jake and Hannah back to talk about what happened. So Jacob, why don't you start and tell us how it began?
Sure. If you listened to the previous episode, then you knew we had a pretty negative point of view as far as what was going to happen there, and we felt like this was going to be, that we were going to be in an abusive kind of situation, and so when we got there, we met with the stake president to start, and he seemed very open and to listening to our point of view when we got there, and so Hannah and I went in, and I had a witness who was there, and he waited outside. And
it was kind of cool, by the way, because on Facebook he was reporting, every 5 minutes or so he would, they just went in, and now, it's kind of quiet in there. I'm not sure what's going on, and then. It sounds like the bishop's talking. He was sort of narrating it over text.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ever been another live blog disciplinary council, so that may have been a first in Mormonism. I'm not sure, but if it was, congratulations to my friend who did the live blogging. So at the beginning of the council, they did an opening prayer, and then my stake president asked me to confirm that everyone present, that I didn't have a problem with them being there, which I thought was a good gesture that I don't think the handbook outlines necessarily. But he asked me if I was okay with everyone there, and I did know one of the high councilmen fairly well, and of course my bishop was there as well as a witness against me at the disciplinary council. And after that, the stake president laid out the charges, and the charges being that I had posted things on Facebook that some members of the ward found had made them have doubts about the church, and so I remember him saying after he went through those things and the accusations that I had made people leave the church or doubt the church. I remember him saying, I just don't know what to do here, and that was kind of the feeling I got from him throughout the council, was that that this was kind of his only move that he could think of, is like, I don't know what to do with this guy in my stake who's asking hard questions that people don't have answers to, and so I guess he sincerely thought that this was the best way to counsel with other brethren about what he should do. So that's why we were there.
Now, just to remind our listeners, you had not had any recent interviews with your stake president leading up to the disciplinary council, correct?
No, I mean I had
phone and email exchanges, right?
Right. Yeah. No, the last face-to-face contact I had with him would have been, I think, in September of 2014, so over a year before that.
Like a year and a half ago, basically.
Yep. Yeah. So it did, that was something that really came as a surprise. And yeah, that it just, that there wasn't any counseling in between. So he, when he outlined to the High Council there that when I stopped attending church that I was the young men's president, and I think that he thought that was important because I had potential influence over young men in the ward, and so I think that was, he wanted to point out that as a concern. And then he told me that I'm charged with apostasy and asked, how do you plead? Kind of like in the courtroom TV shows. And I guess I told him, I guess I'm not sure. Do they say not guilty? So I said not guilty. And so
you didn't consider yourself to be an apostasy?
Well, I don't think according to the handbook that I was. And so that's what I told him is I said, I don't think I meet the definition of apostasy that's laid out in the handbook, being that that you have repeatedly attacked the church and its leaders. And so I told him that, no, I don't feel like that I meet that definition. And I had never publicly stated disbelief in any of the core doctrines of the church. And so based on that, I told him, yeah, I think that people should be able to feel free to discuss the things that I've discussed without being disciplined.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you just didn't meet the criteria from the beginning, that he should have called you into counsel with you to determine that, but that instead he just went straight to a disciplinary council as a way to counsel with you. Does that sound right to you?
It sounds, during the discussion, as we were making our remarks and the witness made remarks, we're kind of talking about how harsh a disciplinary counsel can be, especially with the potential outcome of excommunication. And there were several points that the councilmen were just like, whoa, like this is not about, there might not be any outcome today like that of discipline, and this is just to be fact-finding. And so I think the High Council had the assumption that this wasn't necessarily for discipline, but yet they were following the process of a disciplinary council very closely, and it still had that potential outcome. They still deliberated and tried to figure out what to do with us. So it seemed kind of like they were trying to have it both ways, of it being both the time to counsel with the potential of discipline.
Yeah. Okay, that's what it sounds like. Okay, keep going, Jake. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. And like Hannah says, there was one point that kind of made me smile a little bit. There was a high counselor who kind of raised his hand and said, I'm new to the High Council, and I was under the impression that we were just here to talk. I wasn't under the impression we were here to discipline. And I said, my response was, well, this is called a disciplinary council. That's so from my understanding, we're speaking to the possibility of excommunication, because the letter that I got in the mail said that I could be excommunicated. So anyway, it was kind of made me just kind of smile inside a little bit. So my stake president had a pile of 30 or so pages of Facebook posts that I had participated in, that he printed out for all of the high counselors, and so they each had this packet of information to go over. And so we spent a little over 30 minutes with them just reading through my Facebook posts. And to the stake president's credit, I feel like he tried to give me a fair shake, in that he went and printed out a couple of things that I'd posted that were actually made the argument for me. I posted a link to Rational Faiths when you, John, were being threatened, and the bloggers had come together and signed a document saying they oppose people being disciplined for expressing their beliefs and things like that. And so he printed that out and pointed it out to the High Councilman that the argument is that there should be room for this kind of discussion in the church. And so I appreciated that.
Yeah, and he also included a link to a Salt Lake Tribune article that I had sent him, where Elder Christofferson said that, that people can post things that are, of opposing views of the church on social media without fearing any sort of discipline. And so he printed that off and included it as well, and later on referred to it again. So I also felt like he was trying really to be fair and not come in with a preconceived notion or preconceived idea of what the outcome would be.
Yeah. I just have to note that my stake president explicitly wouldn't allow any positive evidence on my behalf. All he would present was negative stuff. And I asked him about that. And I said, this isn't about the good things you've done. This is just about the bad things you've done. So there's an interesting difference. There's another interesting difference between the stake president approaches.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I can see the reason our disciplinary council turned out the way it did is because of our stake president, because he, I can see how with the same high council and the same participants, just changing that one person. And if we change seats with another person in the room, for example, if one of the other people in the room were the stake president, the outcome probably would have been very different. And just, so he just really set the tone for the meeting. And that, I'm sure that was the case with yours as well, John, that, if the, the stake president sets the tone there. So, so after they read the Facebook post, then the stake president wanted to hear from my bishop, who would talk about the members who had been affected. And he had, as we talked about in the previous episode, he had emailed a list of members who he said had been affected by my Facebook posts, but just very, very vague on how those people were connected to me. And he didn't provide any more details at the council of how these people were connected to me, really. And so...
And no names, right?
Oh, absolutely. And not just no names, no specifics of this person doubted specifically because of this, except for the one exception to that. He says, this is really confusing to me. And this was probably the most awkward exchange in the disciplinary council, was when I was questioned, because I had the chance to question the bishop about the things he was witnessing against me. And so I was trying to pin him down about what is it exactly that I said that caused people to doubt. And the one thing he kept going back to was the historical quiz about James Strang. And for some reason, he had the impression that had really caused a lot of people to doubt. And so I tried to kind of pin him down on it and said, so you're saying that me drawing parallels between these two historical figures made people doubt the church? And he said, yes. And that was kind of the end of it. But the stake president commented at that point and said, he said, I'm a little bit confused about that as well. And so I think we kind of made our point that we weren't, it was, he wasn't doing a good job connecting us to these people. And that was my biggest, one of my biggest protests going into this, was that I was being accused of forcing people out of the church that they weren't necessarily connecting to me. And Hannah actually, during the disciplinary council, even though Hannah was there as a witness, she spoke up quite a few times. And, she would interrupt and she'd raise her hand and say, excuse me, I have something to say. And she would say it. And this was one of those times.
Well, I must say, when I responded, I was feeling quite passionate at the time. And to their credit, they took it all in good stride. But at one point I said, can we please cross off bullet number 4 off of this list? Because it says here that it's someone who was converted and resigned all within this past year. And we haven't been to church in over a year. So I have a general idea of who it might be. I think I might have met her in a social situation, but I don't think she recognized me, and I don't think she knows who Jake is. So if we can please just take that connection off the list. And they kind of said, well, we feel like maybe there were just, if people start questioning in the ward, then it kind of rubs off on other people. And that was kind of the response as to why she was on the list to begin with. But I did not agree.
Yeah, kind of really vague accusations that are really hard to defend.
Right.
Yeah, and then and so it was almost like once people started questioning it, so like anyone who questioned the church after we became inactive, they decided to put on the list because somehow I may have been involved somehow. So, but I think the High Council could kind of see what was happening there, and so I think we were able to make our point on that one. But so it also struck me during that conversation that it became obvious to the people present that the bishop hadn't been in contact with me for over a year and a half, and so that this was really my first exchange with the bishop in almost 2 years. And I hadn't seen him in longer than the stake president, and so I think that they failed to counsel us in the way that they were supposed to, according to the manual, before they take this kind of action. And it was kind of done out of fear and desperation on the bishop's part.
And that was kind of another point that I spoke out against, because they were saying, like, this is just, to gather information, or, like, I hate how they say threatening excommunication. And at that point I spoke up and said, like, that might have been your intent, but it's not how it's perceived. And so when you call, 16 men together at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning, it feels a lot harsher than just to come together for counseling. And perhaps you should change your approach in how you want to counsel people.
Yeah. So when Hannah spoke up, the several times she did speak up, she was very forceful, and she gave them her thoughts. And I'm really impressed at how well they took her thoughts. Right. So because she, we and myself as well, we didn't cede any ground, and I told them that I stand by everything that I've said, everything that they read that I posted, and that if there was something inaccurate about the historical information, I would be happy to change it. But that I stand by everything that I've said, and I told them that I don't believe that it is the place of it is their job to limit the speech of members, and that it's unacceptable for them to tell people what it's okay to know and not know. And so, to be honest, I'm a little surprised at the outcome, considering how open and we were about where we're at and what we believe to be right.
Did they ask you what your beliefs were and weren't in the council?
They did a little bit, yeah. And I was honest with them, and I told them that because one of the high counselors asked, he said it was important to him to know, is my trajectory moving in a direction towards or away from the church? Because that would make a big difference to him. And I was honest with him. I told him, I'm on the spiritual journey of my lifetime, and I have no idea where I'm going to end up. So I don't have a goal in mind right now. I'm doing my best to live the most authentic and good life that I can, and I have no idea where I'll end up. And that was my response.
So you didn't. So did they ask you, like, the temple questions? Do you have a testimony of the restoration? Do you have a testimony, of?
Yeah, no, they didn't. But I had decided beforehand that if they did, I was going to refuse to answer because I didn't feel like that's what we were there for. We were there because of some Facebook posts, and I would have told them that I'm happy to discuss my personal beliefs about higher power or things like that one-on-one with any of you, but that's not why we're here. We're here because of some Facebook posts, so let's talk about the Facebook posts.
But you never actually had to say
that.
But
I never said that because they
didn't push those issues too much.
Yeah, I think you definitely, to have a different outcome, you would have had to tell them specifically that you didn't believe kind of the fundamental truth claims. And it sounds like you didn't do that, which is fine.
I think one of the overall tones of the meeting was us kind of telling them that, the time to hide this information is past. This was a point that also the witness made, that, and it's time now to try to assimilate it into your own testimonies. And I reiterate that again, that if you want these people with infant testimonies, which is who they said Jake's posts were affecting, then that's the time to start telling them some of these uncomfortable truths so that they can grow up with it. And we talked about how the church is becoming more open about their uncomfortable past, and it's time to start reading the essays, and it's time to start understanding these issues.
Yeah, so I guess that was something we talked about quite a bit. Is we gave them a lot of advice during my disciplinary council, and so that was one of the things all of us, I think, spoke to, was that it's the time for keeping uncomfortable information from your members is gone, and at this point, what you have to decide is how you're going to learn the information. But you're not going to be able to decide for long, because it's going to be thrust upon you and your members, and so you've got to deal with it. And there needs to be a forum within the church to discuss these kind of things. And so I think that they kind of heard that advice and acknowledged that there should be a place. So we felt like that was a positive thing, and could be a positive development for members that are going through a faith crisis, because I know us, and I think many like us, found that when we learned these things, there wasn't a local place for us to go to and talk about them. And so that's why a lot of us, I think, congregate in groups on the internet. We find like-minded people where we can discuss these issues. But, I hope that the church can become a safer place, and a place where people can speak about what they find and information that they find, and not have fear of being disciplined because of true things that they talk about that are uncomfortable.
Well, was there any point where you talked about any of your doubts during the disciplinary council?
Well,
yes.
Yeah, well, I can. So I told them. I told them about, because I told them that some of you are probably familiar and some of you aren't, maybe, with the new gospel topics essays, and I said I'd like to read a few quotes, and I picked out some quotes that I think might be surprising to some of you to know that the church has talked about on their own website. So like some of the things
So he pulled out snippets from the gospel topic essays, and he said, I know that these are, some of the more surprising parts of the essays, and they give the essay puts a little bit more context.
Right. So I quoted the essay where it talks about Joseph Smith being married to other men's wives. I quoted the essay on the race and the priesthood, where it says the church disavows the theories of the past about black skin being a representation of not being faithful in the preexistence. I quoted the Book of Abraham essay, where it talks about how the papyrus fragments don't match up with anything in the Book of Abraham. And I talked about Joseph Smith's use of seer stones. I quoted the part where it talks about Joseph Smith using a seer stone to search for buried treasure. I quoted the DNA and Book of Mormon Studies essay that talks about Native Americans being descended from largely Asian DNA. So I quoted all of those things for the stake presidency and for the High Council, and I told them that I do this in a hope that you can understand that people coming to you with doubts aren't just reading anti-Mormon lies. They may have found their doubts on the church's own website. And I also use that as an argument that the church is being more open with these issues, and bringing people in to discipline them because they talk about these issues is not the direction the church is moving. And so it's something they shouldn't be doing. So yeah, I think we covered a few things that.
Right.
So,
but you were careful to couch it in text from the church's website, not your own doubts.
Sure, but I think they understood that these are things that I believe. They read all my Facebook posts, where one of the big things I've discussed on Facebook was blacks in the priesthood, and how that I don't believe that that was a a policy that came from God. So I think they knew that that's not something I believed in. But I don't know. They didn't delve into each of these, and I don't know if they were afraid to, if they're afraid to talk about these things individually. I think as a member of the church, I might have been afraid to talk about them because you would fear losing your belief or your testimony if you dive into it. So, but for some reason, we didn't delve into any of those things in depth. But we left, I think, hopeful that at least in our stake, that maybe the leadership would be willing to give some more training to the people who are counseling members, and we hope that it can be a positive thing for people in the area who have doubts about the church, like we did, and so we feel like we went there to argue that you shouldn't be kicking people out for talking about these issues on social media or publicly, and we left being acknowledged that our opinion was valid and that we were right. And so over the witness of my local bishop, who I think would have liked to have seen me disciplined. So I feel like that was a huge step here in our stake, and I'm hopeful that maybe other places in the church you'll see more positive change. I hope so, because I think that approach would be much better than the approach in the past.
How'd you guys feel? How did they announce the verdict, and how did it make you feel?
Well, so they deliberated. The first part of the council was about 3 hours long.
How many?
And so we were in 3 hours.
3 hours. Okay.
There was a lot of discussion.
There was, yeah. And so we spent about 3 hours in the room. And if I could just talk about one exchange there, it definitely not everyone in the room was on my side. There was one high councilman who, in his final remarks, talked about Jesus, and he said Jesus lived on the earth, and he lived this great life, and he died for our sins, and he would do anything for anybody. And I see nothing at all of Jesus in Brother Rick's, and that was his final thoughts to the stake president. So there was definitely people. He was the most vocal, but there was opposition to my point of view in the room, and that same high counselor went into kind of an attacking line of questioning, and where he was saying, asking me, now that I understand that my opinions affect people and make people doubt the church, does that change how I feel? And I reiterated to him that I don't believe it's his place or anyone's place to tell people what true information they are allowed to know, that we should all be allowed to get all the information before we make an informed decision. And he kept questioning me and kind of attacking me over and over. And finally, the stake president stepped in and said, hey, you need to back off, brother so-and-so. So we spent about 3 hours in there, giving testimony, being questioned. And then they deliberated for, I think, a little more than an hour. And then they brought us in. They brought Hannah and I in and told us that he decided to take no action. And I felt, he was still a little bit torn because he feels like members of the church are being negatively affected. And but he said that he hopes that we can actually help the stake and help him to develop a better forum for people to talk about these things. So we hope to give him some suggestions and give him some resources that we hope will be helpful. So yeah, we saw it as a positive thing.
So if I were to summarize, and you tell me if I'm wrong, if we were to try and get to the bottom of why you weren't excommunicated, here's what I would say. Your comments prior to the disciplinary council were very benign. You didn't ever even really express any direct doubts about the church's fundamental truth claims. So in that sense, and in the sense that you had never even been counseled with by your bishop or stake president directly prior to the disciplinary council, that it never should have been called in the first place. And once you were there, you were smart to not really volunteer any of your specific doubts around the church's truth claims, but instead you quoted from the church's own essays. And you facilitated discussions about the importance of the church being more supportive, but you avoided any conversation that was around your doubts and that would get contentious, revealing you as a doubter or a disbeliever. It sounds like you both were very respectful, and it sounds like your stake president was open and flexible, and that led to no decision. Is that fair to say? Did I get it mostly right?
I think mostly, yeah. I think the biggest factor was that our stake president went in with an open mind. I think it could have gone easily the other direction, even considering that there weren't good grounds for a disciplinary council. I think with another man, if the high counselor that was kind of attacking me was the stake president, or likely if my bishop was the stake president, the outcome would have been very different. So I have to give credit to my stake president. But we didn't hide. I would just say that maybe the one thing I would maybe correct a little bit in your summary is I don't feel like I hid my doubts from them.
I just said you didn't talk about them. You didn't offer them. Is what I meant to say is you didn't offer them.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I wasn't the one to bring them up. But
did I say that you hid them?
No, you didn't. I don't think so.
No,
okay.
I don't think so. But yeah, so I just don't want to give the impression that I did, because Hannah and I were both very open, and we went into it, honestly expecting to be disciplined, and so we were. And we I think had come to peace with that, and so we were happy to be completely honest and upfront with them about what we thought. And so I have to give the most credit, like I say, to my stake president for being open, because I think if it were a different person in his seat, the outcome would have been very different. So
to me, it was kind of a testament of the power of just being able to have an open and authentic conversation where both parties are open, then you can come to a much better consensus. I think if we had tried to maybe pander more to what we thought they might want to hear, it might have had the same decision of no action, but they might not have then extended the request for having us help them in the future, which was really nice. It was a very sincere and heartfelt exchange.
So at the end, they asked you to actually help out with future action,
They said that they would like our suggestions on how they can develop forums within the stake so that people can have conversations about these tough issues. And so I have started to compile a list of changes that people who are trying to make their relationship with the church work, of changes that they would like to see, and I'm going to forward them on to the stake president.
That's great. Well, I'm super happy for you guys that you had a positive an outcome to your liking. I think that's going to be encouraging to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So congratulations on how you handled it. Congratulations to your stake president on how he handled it. And congratulations on getting an outcome that you guys are happy with. That's really good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we hope that it'll be a positive thing for some people. So we know it's not, everyone's situation is different. And like I say, just changing who was in that seat at the head of the table could have changed the decision very easily. So
talk real quickly just about your decision not to release the recording of the actual disciplinary council.
Yeah, I guess, as I said earlier, prior to the council, I felt like this was going to be, from my experience hearing about other people's disciplinary councils and from the little information that I was provided prior, I felt like this was going to be kind of a sham to kick me out of the church, and I wanted to make sure that was documented.
A sham? You broke up for a second. A sham what? What did you say?
Oh, it was going to be kind of a sham council, disciplinary council, that
Yeah.
It was just kind of put on to kick me out of the church. And if that was the case, which I thought it was the case, I was determined to have that documented and released so that hopefully those kind of things would not happen in the future. but since it didn't turn out that way, and since actually we felt the sincere desire that they have to arrive at a good decision, we don't feel good about releasing the audio from it. But like I say, I have to give credit to the stake president, and hope that other people can have a similar. I guess I hope that no one else gets called to a disciplinary council, but I hope that more leaders in the church can have empathy and can try to understand why their members are having these issues. And hopefully this can be a lesson for at least the leaders in my stake that calling people to a disciplinary council for speaking up about issues is not the right move.
Excellent. Well, this is super important, and I'm really grateful you guys would come on Mormon Stories to share your experience. I think many people will be grateful for it, and I think the church is better off by having this conversation and by you guys sharing not only how you handled what you did, but then sharing with everyone else the outcome. So thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time, John.
And, we'll invite you guys to come on the blog. Listeners, please feel free to share your comments or questions. You guys feel free to come on and respond if you want. And I just want to thank all the listeners for their support. And again, Jacob and Hannah Ricks, thanks for coming on Mormon Stories.
Thanks, John.
All right, guys, take care.
You too.
Okay.